Right now, we are seeing the clearest signs yet that the United States and China and Russia are headed for a hot war. Three huge pieces of news that are, frankly, scary as hell, that are being done in relative secrecy, and we should all be paying attention to. We'll get into these news items in a moment, but first, here's Forbes magazine. This week, is the U.S. headed for an all-out war with China? And they're asking this question because we are at a tipping point moment, and some very dangerous things are unfolding. By the way, make no mistake about it, a war with China and Russia would be an absolute catastrophe because at worst, it would end humanity with a nuclear war, and at best, it would send us back into the dark ages. No electrical grids, no internet, no functioning satellites, basically. And these morons in Washington, D.C. seemed hell-bent on making this happen. Back in January, something happened that got almost no media attention. It was done quietly, in Japan even. The Japanese government started paying fishermen to stay away from one particular small island that was close to China. Here's what happened.
Japan's defense ministry began construction of a new base on Mageshima, an island in southwestern Japan, on January 12. Ministry staff and construction workers took a boat to the uninhabited island. The base will also be used by the U.S. military for training.
Oh, the U.S. is coming. According to the Japan Times, the U.S. just took a huge leap closer to China's doorstep. Instead of doing military drills 1,000 miles away on that other island, now they can do them straight up China's ass without having to use mid-air refueling to do it. That was 9 months ago. Then, as we reported this week, the Biden administration is laying the groundwork for bringing back the military draft for young men in the United States. That's right, this is not a fantasy. According to the documents from the U.S. Army War College's plan, they predict that the United States will lose 3,600 soldiers per day in casualties when we start fighting China and Russia. And they say we need the draft now because we won't be able to replace those kinds of numbers without it. Taking 3,600 people per day and throwing them into the meat grinder. They admit this right in black and white, right in their documents, and members of Congress are calling for it. Everything that we're seeing over the past few weeks is coming to a boiling point. It all started in earnest, though, over 10 years ago during the Obama administration in an effort to strangle China. Of course, it goes back much longer than that.
We can see that China is the basic cause of all of our troubles in Asia.
But it really ramped up under Obama in 2015 when it was clear that China would become America's biggest economic and strategic threat. When China announced its Belt and Road Initiative, its partnership with the Middle East, with the rest of Asia to build roads and bridges and trade, Obama then went into high gear. Journalist John Pilger even predicted it and documented it in his amazing documentary, The Coming War on China, where he shows how America's goal is to cut off China's lifeline to oil, gas, and raw materials, strangling China economically, while at the same time surrounding China militarily, building over 400 military bases surrounding China.
We need an enemy for all this money, and China's the perfect enemy.
I pity a country that would come up against us. We get better and better and better.
China's economy is slowing rapidly, thanks in part to U.S. sanctions. It's all going according to their plan. And China is getting desperate. Now remember, desperate people do desperate things. Do you believe for a second, by the way, that China's going to sit back and take this? Of course not. If you listen to the neocons in Washington, it's China that's provoking the United States. And the United States building military bases on China's doorstep can lead to regime change, an overthrow of Xi Jinping and the installation of democracy. Here's neocon warmonger Bill Kristol.
Willingness to intervene to seek regime change is key to an American foreign policy that benefits America. I think this is correct. I think I would notice that it says a willingness to intervene. Doesn't mean you have to intervene everywhere. It doesn't have to be advised interventions, but a willingness to intervene, which implies defense treaties, commitments to allies, forward basing of troops, probably, all the characteristics of the post-1945 post-war order.
What neocons are so concerned about is what China just did. Beijing just released a new map of the territorial waters and the territory that it claims to own. This new line of territorial land and waters can be seen as the natural response to being surrounded by U.S. military bases and being sanctioned into a recession, a big chess move by China. The U.S., though, is pissed about it, as you can imagine. We heard this week from the Pentagon, how could China possibly lay claim to waters that are fished by the Philippines? Neocons are pissed.
Beijing released a new map of the waters and territories it claims as its own. This document, dubbed the -10 line, is the most aggressive one yet. As in previous such exercises, China says most of the South China Sea, a critical international waterway, belongs to it. It's not just maps that are worrisome here. China's overtly aggressive actions in this region continue. Freedom of the seas has been a core U.S. principle for over 200 years. China is challenging that fundamental part of our security foundation.
China pushing for war? Really? Meanwhile, some experts believe what the U.S. greenlit this week could bring us closer to war than ever before. The U.S. just announced a massive new military replicator drone program aimed squarely at China. Now, Kathleen Hicks from the Defense Department says China has too many ships, and they can make them faster than we can. We can't keep up. So here's what we'll do instead. We're going to go small, make a cloud of cheap attack drones that will hover over China's coast, and then we can attack their large ships faster than ever before.